Good morning, good afternoon, perhaps good evening. Let's explore tuning with Melodyne. Let's jump in and find just efficient, succinct ways on how to interact with the program. And perhaps more interestingly, what are the emotional byproducts of this process? Diving into the most practical ways to use Melodyne, we're going to tune some vocals, we're going to create some harmonies, and we're going to get a little creative with some polyphony. To do all of this, we're going to be using the song The Sound by Julius and their Philharmonicos. That sounds something like this. Just a little teaser. So let's first explore what is Melodyne, what does it try to do? Melodyne, first and foremost, does like 20 million things. You know, it probably can help you prepare your taxes and help you in the kitchen, but we're going to focus in on tuning. We have to understand that Melodyne, unlike, say, Autotune, it's an editor. What do I mean by an editor? If we go and put Melodyne in this vocal right here. Where are you? Melodyne, 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 Melodyne. Going once, boom, here we are. So Melodyne, as you can see, opens right up. And the first thing I want to point to is this transfer button. This transfer button serves as a recording button. So once we push this, we are going to feed our audio into the Melodyne editor. What does this mean? This means that if we have a track like this one here, once we transfer this into Melodyne, we won't have access to this track anymore. So, for example, here if I hit play,
this is the sound and it's this is the sound and it's choo-choo-choo.
And gave you a little bit of a taste of that. Of course, if I grab this vocal and I delete it,
this is the sound.
You will stop hearing it, of course. So the interesting thing is that when you record something into Melodyne, which we're going to do in a second, this ability goes away. So in order to demonstrate this, I'm going to create a duplicate playlist and I'm going to call it comp. And I'm going to make a very quick comp, knowing that I won't have access to this track anymore. And let's listen.
This is the sound and it's this is the sound and it's choo-choo-choo. This is the sound and it's
So I'm going to get rid of these,
choo-choo-choo.
even though they're super cool, but I'm just going to get rid of them because I am not going to have them as my lead vocal. Perhaps you can see here at the bottom that I have a couple of instances of those later. All right, so I am editing these out, pardon me. And as we are done with our comp, let's go and now put this into Melodyne. You might have caught that I had an EQ, still have an EQ, that I moved to the second rung of the plugin slots. The reason for this is that Melodyne will record not only the audio that you see here as an editor, but it will also record the output of any other plugin that is before it. So we're going to give Melodyne the best chance of tuning if we give it the purest sound. In other words, we don't want to have it capture the output of this EQ. So I'm moving it right underneath the first instance of Melodyne. So here we are. We're going to go right to the beginning of the track, and I'm going to hit transfer. Right before we do so, I just want to point out to this very cool thing, which if you see here our session folder, you see that there's a Melodyne folder that was already created. And there are no audio files inside of it, but already it's preparing to grab this audio that it's about to record and put in its editor, and it's having a folder that it's going to keep all of the Melodyne related files inside of it. So now that we hit the transfer button, here we go.
This is the sound and it's this is the sound and it's this is the sound and it's this is the sound and it's.
And for these demo purposes, we're going to leave it at this. So to prove my claim that now we don't have access to this file anymore, if we come here, I am going to very quickly do a little bit of deleting as we had before, and check this out.
This is the sound and it's
like magic. Even though we don't see it, it's playing it back. Why? Because it's not playing back this audio, this waveform anymore. It's playing back this that's in here. Furthermore, if we now go into transfers, you see that now at 5:31, it just created a brand new file, which is actually what we're listening to. So now that I have proven this claim, let's go and take a little tour of Melodyne. Again, just the most salient tuning aspects of it. So the first thing I want to point to is that we hit transfer, it recorded everything, we hit stop, it took a minute to think, and immediately these little blobs came on. These little blobs, it's seeing them as melodic blobs. If we go under algorithm, you see here that it can do universal, melodic, polyphonic. It sees intelligently that it's melodic. So we're going to keep it there because in fact it is. No, I don't want to change algorithm. Sorry. In fact, it is melodic. So that's the first thing. The second thing that is going to have a lot of play, of course, are these different tools up here. We have the main tool, pitch tool, formant tool, amplitude tool, time tool, and note separation tool. We're going to spend the majority of our time in this video with the main, the pitch, and the formant tools. And amplitude, time, and note are pretty self-explanatory, so we'll see them here and there, but you can explore them on your own. Instead of having to go up here every single time, I'm just going to give you a quick tip, which is if you push down Control and click anywhere on the screen, you'll have a shortcut to these little tools. So let's explore the first one. We have the main tool has the pointer, which points. You'd never guess that, right? Then the second thing that it does is scroll. So this little hand, we can move things around. And then the zoom tool, you'll never guess it, provides your very own version of extreme close-ups. Then we have the more interesting pitch tool. The pitch tool comes in 3 flavors. Let's explore the first one, which is just the main use of pitch tool. If you click on any little blob, you see that it, of course, gets highlighted in red, and it tells us this note is mostly closely centered to A3, and its center pitch is 25 cents above 0. So it's telling us it's 25 cents a little bit sharper than A3. If we click on any of these, you see that it's giving us a read of all of these. If we grab this tool and quickly double click on any of the blobs, it's going to quantize to the nearest center and keep it at 0. So if you see this here being at A3 plus 25, I double click on this and you see that it brought it to 0. And you see here that it brought it to 0 of the closest note, which is unfortunately not the note that we want. Let me just backtrack a little bit so you can hear this. How we just quantized it wrong.
This is the sound and this is the sound.
And that's no fault of its own. It's just trying to help, right? So it just put it in the closest thing. I'm going to undo and undo. So that's what happens when you double click. You can grab the entire selection, double click it, and it's going to quantize to the nearest 0 point. The next thing that I want to show you is with this tuning tool, you can take the blob, and if you move it up or down, it's going to quantize in grid, as you can see. And this is going to come in handy later on when we create harmonies, but just so you know, it's going to do that unless you push the Option button. And then you can have a fine, not a coarse, gridded way to move up your pitch up and down. So that pretty much takes care of this first pitch tool. Then let's go to, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So now let's go to the second flavor of this pitch tool, which is the pitch modulation tool. You see here that every note has a squiggly line that goes up and down, and these are telling us what the modulation is, right? Like vibrato, it goes up and down. If we grab this tool, we can either flatten or actually amplify the modulation. So and let's hear this.
This is the sound and it's
one more time.
This is the sound and it's
You hear that it's zero modulation, making it sound super robotic. And then we have this super amplified modulation on the second half, right? Here it is again.
This is the sound and it's
So let's just put this back. But that is what this tool does. It can either flatten or amplify modulation. Lastly, we have the pitch drift tool. So what this does is it strives to keep the modulation just the same, but it almost equalizes it so that it's more centered around the center of the pitch. So here, for example, if you see this note, you see that it's trying to keep the modulation. This one looks good. So you see here that it keeps the modulation going up and down, but it's trying to equalize it. And if we listen to that,
this is the sound and it's this is the sound and it's
so it's keeping all of the vibrato, if you will, but it's just centering a little bit more around the pitch, right? If we don't want something as drastic. So now that we've taken a look at that, I'm going to leave these other tools, like say a formant tool and the other ones, for later. We'll see them as they come up. But now I'm going to select everything and I am going to reset everything to its original state. So what I'd like to do now that we have just a super quick overview of these tuning tools in Melodyne is let's go and tune these vocals and really look out for the emotional byproducts of tuning, right? Because how do we decide how much do we need to tune or not? Well, it's how do you want it to feel? Do you want it to sound very secure and epic and solid? And how does then the intonation or lack thereof factor into that? Do you want it to be something that sounds very, very dramatic and like a special effect, or do you want it to be more transparent? So because this phrase repeats 4 times, let's take 4 very different approaches at tuning this vocal. Let's grab this first one actually and leave it just as is. Let's not touch this one. But the second one, I'm only going to grab this main pitch tool and let's double click on it so that it quantizes it into place. So now it just centered the center of the pitch to 0 on each one of these. Now let's grab this third one, do the same thing, and you see already that it tried to quantize this note. And because it was closer to this A sharp, it did that. I'm going to bring it down to A, of course. But now that these two are basically the same, let's grab now the pitch modulation tool and tighten it up a little bit. And then lastly, let's grab this fourth one. And let's also quantize all of these notes right into pitch. But now let's grab the pitch modulation tool, and I'm going to double click on it. And it's just going to put everything at 0. With this, let's go now listen to the emotional byproduct of these very different 4 tuning approaches.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
So because this goes by pretty fast, I'm actually going to give us a one more bar of pre-roll, and then let's take another listen at this. And again, just zero in on how it feels. At the end of the day, we have to remember that people that actually listen to music, 99 point whatever percent of the population that don't make music, they'll never know what we do with these blobs and these tools. So it's all about how does it feel at the end of the day. Here's that once again.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
All right. So of course, each one of you is going to have a different opinion on which one is the best. And that's what is cool, right? What makes each one of us unique. For my approach, since I originally produced this track and I'm redoing it again with you guys, I'm going to put everything back, and this is what I'm going to choose. I am going to take an approach that is a little bit tight. I want these vocals to sound like each note is being hit confidently, which right now we don't quite have that, especially in these first few. This is that. I want it to feel super confident. The rest of them can be a little bit more wobbly. So I'm just going to take my pitch tool, my main pitch tool, double click, make sure that anything that is wrong is now in place. Then I'm going to grab my modulation tool and again, just do kind of a lightly tightening up of everything. And then for these first, I'm going to, again, take this pitch modulation tool and get a little bit harder. And here, of course, I'm just looking at it. I'm not listening, but we will listen and, of course, put this to taste. So let's see where we are.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Good. I think we got a lot better, but I think we can still be a little bit tighter. So I'm just going to grab these, make them a touch tighter. And then there are a few that I caught. This one could be a little bit more. This one as well. Let's check it out.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Great. And not to belabor the point, but I want to actually put these back, exaggerate. This is the sound. That has a lot to do with the character. So I'm going to boost that. Boost this one a little bit. And I think we are good to go. One last listen.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Sounds great. And if we listen to it in bypass, this is what it was originally.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Great. To me, we have something now that sounds, for lack of a better word, more confident, but it sounds like there's still a human there with grit. So now that we've tuned these vocals here, let's move on to exploring how to get creative and make harmonies with Melodyne. So we have these vocals here, and I am going to go ahead and duplicate this track. So I'm going to make an exact duplicate with all the plugins and everything. So this is now an exact copy, right? If we listen to it, it's just going to be the same performance, just really loud because we now have two of them. So
this is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
So now that these are identical, you know what? I'm actually going to go and label this. So comp harm. Actually, pardon me. This is Vox lead harm 1 for harmony 1 and then comp. Okay, so now that we have that properly labeled, let's go and make harmonies. So what I'm about to show you is either something that I do all the time when I have a demo and I'm trying to dream up of cool harmonies. I just plop the lead vocal into Melodyne, move notes until it sounds like I want it to feel, and then maybe have that in my back pocket so that I can offer it when we're doing harmonies. Or sometimes I don't have the luxury of, recording vocals again and I must create harmonies using Melodyne. So here we go. Now we have these vocals here, and I'm going to go to my main pitch tool, select everything, and I am going to put these up a fifth.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
And you already hear that we have now harmonies that are high. We also hear that they kind of sound a little bit like it's a chipmunk. So yeah, they sound thinner and smaller because we have basically done what? Pitched them up a fifth and totally messed with the formants. So what are formants? In short, formants, imagine that we have a sonic signature that is made by and delineated by the size of our chest, the size of our throat, and when we pitch something up or down, it's as if we are changing the size of our chest and our throat. So obviously you pitch something up, it's like you make your chest really tiny, and therefore it sounds like this.
This is the sound and it's.
Which is unnatural. So here in Melodyne, we have this formant tool. I selected everything, and if we listen, as we listen, I'm going to bring this up and down. And as I bring it up, you'll hear that it sounds even smaller. And if I bring it down, it'll sound like your chest is kind of expanding back out. Check it out.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
So you hear it quickly in action, how it really changes what's happening now. So since we tuned this up a fifth and made it sound really thin like a chipmunk, this will counterbalance to try to make it sound more natural. Do we always want to make it sound more natural? No. But in this instance, we are going for that sound. So let's try to bring the formants down and have them feel more believable, for lack of a better word.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
This sounds pretty good to me. So now we're blending this a little bit better with the lead. And now that that's there, as I was saying before, I love using Melodyne as a creative tool. So now we have our exact tuning in fifths, but how about if we start playing with different ideas? Like, for example, this is the sound and it's.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
And then.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound.
And how about maybe this last one?
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
So we go, this is the sound. And then da-dum. Get a little bluesy there.
This is the sound and it's.
And because we're doing this and tuning it up quite a bit, we might have to reformant this. Yeah, that's the verb. To reformant.
This is the sound and it's.
Right, and we're pushing it quite a bit, so it's going to sound a little bit funky, but maybe funky is also cool. So let's listen from the top with the whole track and see how this feels.
This is the sound and it's.
And a little more pre-roll.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Great. This is sounding really good to me, and to try to nest it inside the vocals a little more, the things that I found were one, the volume is pretty loud. So I'm just going to bring this down just a few dB. Another thing is that by having these vocals be as bright as the lead, they're poking out. So I'm just going to turn off these boosts that I've made in the top end. And then finally, this is right here, it really jumps out because it's quite loud. So here is an instance where I'm just going to quickly go to this amplitude tool, select all of these, and bring them down a little. Let's listen and see how this gels in with the lead.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Great. Feels good. Sounds good. Yes, we can fine tune a few little instances of amplitude here and there, but it sounds and feels really good to me. Now that we have this, let's now move on to the next part of the program, which is what happens if you're working in a station that has Melodyne, but maybe your laptop at home you do not. So we need to be able to render the output of Melodyne, render the output of the plugin so that you can play it back without it being there. So basically write a brand new audio file that has this process built into it. And we're going to do that by using commit. So here we have our tracks with live Melodyne going on, and commit, if we push Control and then click on the name of the track, we see here that we can commit a file. Commit is basically going to let us do this that I just mentioned. It's going to let us render and commit the sound of the plugins to the track. So what do we want to commit? Selected tracks? Yes, of course. Do you want to consolidate the clips? No, I want to have access to all the little chops that I made. Do you want it to render automation, etc., etc.? No. Do you want to copy the sends and the group assignments? Let's say yes. Insert after the last selected track, right below, yes. And what happens to the source track? Do we do nothing? Do we make it inactive? For now, let's do nothing because we're going to compare. And yes, we're going to have it be offline. Before I hit OK, though, there's an issue. The issue is that we're going to commit Melodyne, but we will also be committing the EQ, which I do not want to render the output of the EQ. So I'm going to cancel out of this. I am going to bypass the EQ, and now I'm ready to commit. So make sure that everything is proper, boom, and it's rendering live. And here we are. So if we look, we have now 2 tracks that in theory should sound just the same. We'll see that this one below has CM for commit. And to see if this is accurate, we're going to toggle between these two to see if they sound identical or not.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
And yes, they are the same. So now that we have that committed, what I can do is turn on my EQ once again, and I'm just going to copy that EQ over here. And because I don't need this track anymore, I am just going to hide and make it inactive. And then I'm going to do exactly the same for this one very quickly. So here I am going to commit and not consolidate the kip, yada, 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 yada. Magical, 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 magic. Yeah, that's what I always say when things are rendering. I'm going to trust that it sounds the same because it has to. I'm going to copy this EQ, put this back in here, and hide and make it active. So now we have the ability to open up this track anywhere. And the work we did in Melodyne is going to be heard without the plugin having to be there because we just committed it.
This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's. This is the sound and it's.
Magical. What next? The last thing I want to show you very quickly as just a little going away little gesture is let's look at polyphony in Melodyne. So to do that, let's go and take a look at the chorus. In the chorus, we have these rowdy electric guitars.
This is the sound and its rhythm makes me alive and a believer. Rhythm in revolution. Now, what we need is constant evolution.
So these guitars here are, you see that I have one panned hard left, the other one panned right. I have a couple of distortion plugins on them, and I also have this saturating plugin there. I'm going to want to mess with the notes inside of the chords of these. So before you think of rocking electric guitars, think of this as an example where you're going to have to tune things that maybe are playing together in an ensemble, and you want to affect notes that are within a chord, which is mind-blowing. So imagine, for example, you have a string quartet, and the second violin is going, and you need to tune just the second violin. But obviously, if the second violin solo track is available and you tune that, the bleed of the second violin in the other microphones is not tuned. So now you're going to create this phase issue, which is impossible. So what do we need to do? We need to have a scenario like this with this rhythm guitar, which is what? You would grab your string quartet with your, let's say, 4 microphones for each instrument, and you would put them out of a bus. So you see here that I have the output of these tracks is going to a bus that is then going to this aux, which has as an input that bus. Now that I've summed everything together, what I can do is tune the stereo summing of all of those tracks, which then will grab that hypothetical second violin and tune it together. If it sounds a little complicated, rewind the video and watch it again. But what I just want to say is we can grab a bunch of different signals, sum them together, put an instance of Melodyne, and then do the crazy mind-blowing thing that is tuning polyphony. So let's transfer this in.
This is the sound and its rhythm makes me alive and a believer. Rhythm in revolution. Now, what we need is constant evolution. This is the.
So now that the guitars are there, you've seen that it said polyphony detection, and it gives us a readout of all of the notes. Here, if we go to algorithm, you see that it's actually on polyphonic sustain. So the insane thing about this is that it's obviously giving us a read of that note and that one and that one, which is crazy. And the cool thing is that we can then have access, right, to any one of these to create something that is maybe something where we need to fix. Oh, you sampled something and it's minor, but you wanted to make it major. You can fix it here. Somebody's a little bit out of tune. You can fix it here. I am going to creatively, since these chords are 4 of the same and it gets a little monotonous, I played them, so I get to say that. I'm going to grab the third instance and make it a little bit more tense harmonically, and I'm going to grab the fourth instance and make a little motif. So here we are. Okay, so I'm going to grab this third one here. I'm just going to fast forward to this third one here. And give it a little bit of attention. Great. So this I love, the tension that gives it. It feels like pregnant with suspense. And then this note here I really like, but it needs to be louder. It also needs to be longer. So I'm going to go to the time tool, and like I was saying before, please explore these on your own. But let me grab this thing and pull it right up. I'm also going to grab this note and bring it here so that it feels like there's a motif, kind of a melody that's going to cadence to the end. So let's hear this. Great. And this just needs to be a little bit louder. Let's hear it in context. And you know what? Let's make this a little bit louder so that we can hear how it sounds with everything together. Here we go.
This is the sound and its rhythm makes me alive and a believer. Rhythm in revolution. Now, what we need is constant evolution.
I love it. I love it. It's subtle, but it really lifts the chorus up. I'm going to turn this up. So it's going to be exaggerated, but just so we can really appreciate the notes that are there and give it one final listen and see how these few moves with polyphonic tuning with Melodyne, of course, it really injects this chorus with a lot of life.
This is the sound and its rhythm makes me alive and a believer. Rhythm in revolution. Now, what we need is constant evolution.
Love it. So, before I get super excited and want to produced this whole track top to bottom. I hope that this pinpointed, succinct kind of demo at how to tune with Melodyne has been useful to you, both in how to approach the tool, how to understand how it wants to work, best practices for it, and also how to get creative with it, you know, how to really lift the potential of your work from creating special effects that are obvious to just transparently really trying to bolster whatever emotions you're intending to do. So thanks, and I'll see you at the next one.